Hey guys, welcome back to Election Center, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at the closest U.S. presidential elections. Some of the closest elections we've ever had in this country at the presidential level. And I just do want to clarify that this is not a top 10, top 5 list per se. This is really just a collection of some of the elections that stood out to me as being really close. So, if you guys are looking through the past results, maybe there's a chance you'll find an election that is closer than some of these that I did not include here. But these are the ones that stood out to me as being really some of the closest and really stood out from the rest of the pack in my eyes. But yeah, the closest U.S. presidential elections, and I really just have them ranked, really not in much of a particular order. By the way, I made this video on Google Slides. This is a Google Slides presentation that I made, just in case you're wondering what I'm using to make this. But anyway, let's just jump in here with the first election, 1868, which stood out to me as being a really close election. We have Richard Nixon, the Republican nominee, versus Hubert Humphrey, the Democratic nominee. And then we have George Wallace here of the American Independent Party, a third-party candidate. And we see here in the popular vote, Nixon wins by just 0.7%, so less than a percentage point. Let's just read off the numbers here. Nixon, 43.42%. Humphrey, 42.72%, and then Wallace here getting 13.53% of the vote. In terms of which states were won, we have Humphrey here with 191 electoral votes. He is the second place. Wallace here, third party, getting 46 electoral votes, and Nixon here getting 301 electoral votes. So it seems like a decent margin for Nixon in the electoral vote. But we do got to remember those third-party electoral votes for Wallace, and in the popular vote was much closer. But anyway, the tipping point state here was Illinois, which was just a 2.92% margin. And in case you don't know what the tipping point is, basically that means that's the state where if Humphrey won that state, as well as all the other states that were closer than the tipping point, he would have gotten the number of electoral votes needed to win the election. So basically, Illinois was a margin of 2.92 points. So if Humphrey had been able to get enough support to win Illinois, as well as all of the states that were even closer than Illinois, he would have won the election. And we see here, he was just 2.92% in terms of the margin. That was the margin in Illinois, so actually really close in Illinois. So yeah, Nixon doing... he early on had a much larger lead, but some events in the campaign happened. Humphrey was able to have a bit of a comeback, or really a lot of a comeback, not a bit of a comeback, a serious comeback. And it was kind of down to the wire on election day, but Nixon ended up winning. And then Wallace taking those 5 states here, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, North Carolina. I think there may have been some faithless electors that went for Wallace or something like that. But anyway... real close in 1968. In 1888, we have Grover Cleveland, the Democrat, versus Benjamin Harrison, the Republican. And we see here, Grover Cleveland won the popular vote by 0.83%, but Harrison was able to win in the Electoral College, giving him the win. And we see there were a lot of, really close states, or a number of really close states. Here in New York, this was the decisive state. 36 electoral votes in New York, a large prize for the winner. And it went to Harrison by just a 1.09 margin. And so, yeah, that gave Harrison the win, but Grover Cleveland winning that popular vote. And we see it was just a 1.09 margin in New York. So real close here, I believe this was Grover Cleveland's initial failed re-election bid, but then I think he was able to win in the subsequent election. He lost his first re-election bid, but then he tried to win after that. And this time he was the challenger to the incumbent Harrison, and he ended up winning that election. But yeah, real close in 1888. 1876, earlier on, Tilden, the Democrat, versus Hayes, the Republican. Tilden here winning the popular vote by 3 points. 50.92% to 47.92% for Hayes. And we see here the tipping point state, South Carolina, by 0.49%. So the results of this election were very disputed just because it was such a close election. And we see here Hayes winning 185 electoral votes to Tilden's 184. there was a number of states, I believe, that were disputed, and there was a compromise to give these states to Hayes. But maybe Tilden was the true winner. I guess Hayes was declared the winner in these states. But there had to be a deal that was struck, so that the one side agreed to let Hayes be the winner. But then there was a deal struck to let that happen. And we see here Hayes barely won the election, but Tilden won the popular vote by 3 points. 1876, real close. 1916, Woodrow Wilson's re-election bid against Charles Evans Hughes. So we see here Woodrow Wilson won the popular vote by 3.14% to 49.25%. Wilson, the Democrat, versus Republican Hughes getting 46.11%. But we see here in the electoral vote, it was quite close. 277 for Wilson, 254 for Hughes. And the tipping point state, California, just a 0.38% margin, so really close. Let me calculate here. If Hughes had California, it would have been, let's see here, 267 for Hughes, and then Wilson getting 267, 264. So yeah, I think California was the closest state. It ended up being the decisive state of this election. California, 0.38%, real close in 1916. I think maybe there have been closer elections than this, obviously, but this is one of the closer ones that really stands out as being close. We see here Hughes taking these northern states. Up here, these northeastern states, it looks like Wilson sweeping the south and a lot of these other regions. Now, moving on to 1884, I believe this is when Grover Cleveland first got elected. Grover Cleveland, the Democratic nominee, getting elected for his first time to the Oval Office, beating James Blaine, the Republican. And we see here Cleveland won the popular vote by a really close 0.57%, so very close in the popular vote. But then let's look at the tipping point state here, New York, a margin of 0.10%. 36 electoral votes in New York, big prize, and it was the decisive state, decided for Cleveland by just 0.1%. So we see here in the electoral vote, 219 for Cleveland, 182 for Blaine. So this was a real tight race. And just look at that tipping point state, real close in 1884. 1960, John F. Kennedy versus Richard Milhous Nixon. And look at that popular vote margin, 0.17%. So it was for Kennedy, the Democrat, 49.72%. For Nixon, the Republican, 49.55%. It was far more decisive in the electoral vote, though. 303 for Kennedy, 219 for Nixon. And then it looks like 15 or so electors, basically in a couple of states, southern states, there was a slate of unpledged Democratic electors put on the ballot because of Kennedy's record on civil rights. This was when maybe people in that region were not going to approve of that. So there was a slate of unpledged electors that ended up voting for Henry Byrd or Harry Byrd. I can't quite remember his first name, but I know his last name was Byrd. Yeah, or maybe it was Bayard. I don't quite remember the name of the individual those electors ended up giving their votes to, but yeah, it was an unpledged slate put on the ballot in those states. 15 of those electors ended up going to a third candidate. But anyway, the tipping point state was New Jersey, and we see in New Jersey it was a 0.8% margin. So really, if Nixon had won that state, and if there were states that were smaller than New Jersey, they would have gone. Richard Nixon would have won the election. Yeah, looks like he would have needed the states that were also closer. So yeah, you see there was a lot of really close states in this election that if Nixon had won, he would have taken the Oval Office. And look at that popular vote margin, one of the closest of all time, I believe. Just very close in the popular vote, and the electoral vote fairly close. A bit more decisive for Kennedy than some of these past elections for their respective winners. But yeah, if Nixon had managed to just do a tiny bit better in a handful of states, he would have won. But anyway, real close in 1960. And then finishing it off, folks, with the election of 2000. So this is known as being one of the closest elections of all time. Look at that electoral vote. For Gore, the Democrat, 266, Al Gore, and then for George Bush, the Republican, 271. We all know that since all the states have been added and DC has been added, you need 538 electoral votes. Or when we reach 538 electoral votes in total, you need 270 to win, because that's a majority. And we see here Bush here getting 271 electoral votes. And then there must have been a faithless elector or something, because Gore's getting 266, or maybe there was an absent elector. Yeah, something like that. I think there was an absent elector, if I'm recalling right. 537 electoral votes in total. But yeah, really close in this election. And so in the popular vote, Al Gore won. He got 48.38% to Bush's 47.87%. That's a 0.51 margin. But then look at this tipping point state here, folks. Florida, 25 electoral votes, 0.0092%. I mean, it was 500 votes out of millions. And, it could have been maybe Gore got votes if they had done more recounts. But eventually, a court decision put a stop to the recounts because, the votes would change. Each time they do a recount, the votes would change a tiny bit because the margins were so close that any tiny difference would have changed the winner. And yeah, eventually, after one of the recounts or something, Bush had a narrow lead of 500 votes or so, and it was declared no more recounts, so Bush was the winner in Florida. That gave him the election. So this is one of the closest elections of all time, because look at that tipping point state. Really, really close in Florida. But anyway, yeah, so this is well known as almost just infamous, just because it was insanely close. Look at that tipping point margin. And, a lot of people dispute whether or not who is the true winner. That's what's so notable about this election. So yeah, one of the closest elections of all time. I figured this was sort of be the grand finale of this video. To finish off with 2000, a really close election. Al Gore, the Democrat, versus George Bush, the Republican, and Bush was the winner. 2004 was also close. I just didn't think I quite made the cut for this video, but it was a pretty close election. I didn't include it in this video, but if you guys want to check out the results of 2004, yeah, it was pretty close in 2004 as well for Bush's re-election against John Kerry, but not as close as some of these other elections. Definitely not as close as 2000, George Bush versus Al Gore. But anyway, guys, that's a wrap on this video. So I hope you enjoyed this video, guys, and thought it was interesting. And, if you want to put a comment down in the comment section below and let me know your thoughts on all this. I'm really interested in hearing you guys' takes, thoughts, and opinions on all this. And, maybe I can have a conversation with you in the comment section. I'd actually really enjoy doing that. But yeah, also especially a reason to give a comment is if there's another really close election you think I should have included. I definitely want to know about that. And I can check out the results for myself and see, maybe I should have included it in this video, and it'll be interesting to see some of these other elections that I just didn't include in this video that were also really close. And we can talk about those. But anyway, guys, so yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video, thought it was interesting, and if you enjoy this type of content I make here on this channel, about elections, all things related to U.S. elections, U.S. presidential elections, Senate elections, gubernatorial elections. Maybe I'll start doing representative elections. Definitely subscribe to my channel if you're into this sort of thing, because if you're into this sort of thing, my videos are going to be right up your alley, so you should definitely subscribe to my channel. But anyway, guys, I say it one last time. I hope you enjoyed this video, thought it was interesting, and I will see you in the next Election Center video. Bye, guys.